What is it about horror monsters that just grabs us and refuses to let go? Is it the jump scares? The chilling atmosphere? Or is it the monsters themselves? These incredible embodiments of our deepest fears. Today, we're diving deep into the dark heart of horror to compare two distinct, yet equally terrifying, types of movie monsters. On one side, we have the unstoppable physical force, the slasher. On the other, the insidious supernatural entity, the cosmic horror. And to make things really interesting, we're going to pit two absolute titans against each other. The relentless Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th versus the shape-shifting nightmare, Pennywise the dancing clown from it. Who would win in an all-out battle? Let's break it down. First, let's understand our contenders by looking at their archetypes. The slasher is the boogeyman made flesh. Think Michael Myers, Leatherface, and of course, our boy Jason. They are typically human, or at least were at some point. Their horror is immediate and visceral. They are a physical threat. You can see them, you can touch them, and unfortunately, they can definitely touch you back, usually with something very sharp. Slashers represent a primal fear of violence and the unstoppable assailant. They are relentless, single-minded, and incredibly durable. They tap into our fear of the unknown stranger, the person who wants to hurt us for reasons we can't comprehend. Jason Voorhees is the pinnacle of this. Drowned as a boy, he returns as a seemingly immortal, machete-wielding force of nature, a silent guardian of Camp Crystal Lake, punishing anyone who trespasses. His strength is legendary, his methods are brutal, and he just keeps coming. No matter what you throw at him, axes, bullets, even explosions, Jason gets back up. His fear factor is his sheer physical dominance and his refusal to die. He's less a man and more a walking, unstoppable catastrophe. Now, let's switch gears to the supernatural entity. This is where things get trippy. These monsters, like Pennywise, the Babadook, or Freddy Krueger, operate on a different plane of existence. Their horror isn't just about physical danger. It's about psychological and existential dread. They don't just want to kill you. They want to break your mind. They feed on your fear, your trauma, and your deepest insecurities. Pennywise is the perfect example. It's not just a clown. It's an ancient, cosmic being from a place beyond our comprehension, the Macroverse. It crash-landed on Earth millions of years ago and wakes up every 27 years to feast on the children of Derry, Maine. Why children? Because their fears are simpler, more potent, and according to it, they taste better. Pennywise's greatest weapon is its ability to shapeshift into whatever you're most afraid of. Afraid of spiders? It becomes a giant spider. Traumatized by your father? It takes his form. It doesn't just attack your body, it attacks your soul. Its power is rooted in belief and emotion. The more you fear it, the more real and powerful it becomes. The horror is psychological, a twisting of reality itself until you can't tell what's real and what's a nightmare. So we have our two types, the physical juggernaut and the psychological terror. Now for the main event, Jason Voorhees versus Pennywise. Let's set the scene. Imagine Jason, for whatever reason, wanders out of Crystal Lake and finds himself in the charming, fear-soaked town of Derry, Maine. It's feeding time for Pennywise, and this hulking, silent figure in a hockey mask certainly catches its attention. How would this fight go down? Let's analyze this round by round. Round 1. The initial encounter. Pennywise loves to play with its food. It would likely start by trying to intimidate Jason. It would appear as a leper, a giant bird, or maybe even as his mother, Pamela Voorhees. It would whisper taunts, trying to find a crack in Jason's psyche. And here's where Pennywise hits its first major roadblock. What is Jason afraid of? His original death was by drowning, so maybe water? We've seen him navigate underwater environments just fine, so that seems unlikely to be a crippling fear. His driving force is rage and a twisted sense of vengeance, not fear. He's a silent, emotionless killing machine. Pennywise's psychological games, which work so well on emotionally complex humans, would be like throwing pebbles at a brick wall. Jason doesn't have complex fears for Pennywise to exploit. He has a singular, unwavering mission: kill. Pennywise's taunts and transformations would likely be met with a blank, emotionless stare, followed by a swift swing of a machete. Round 1, I have to say, goes to Jason for his immunity to psychological warfare. Round 2, the physical confrontation. Okay, so scaring Jason isn't working. Pennywise would have to get physical. In its various forms, it has demonstrated considerable strength. It can tear people apart and manipulate the physical world. But is it stronger than Jason? Jason has punched a man's head clean off, crushed a skull with his bare hands, and survived injuries that would vaporize a normal person. He is a tank of pure brute force. Pennywise could transform into something monstrous and physically imposing, like the giant spider form we see in the movies. But Jason has fought and won against all sorts of opponents. He's a master of improvisation, using whatever is at hand to inflict maximum damage. A giant spider might be scary, but to Jason, it's just a bigger target. He would likely start hacking away at its legs, unfazed by its appearance. Pennywise relies on its form, causing fear to give it an edge. Without that fear, its physical form might not have the same invulnerability. It can be physically harmed, as the Losers Club proved. Jason's entire existence is about causing physical harm. He wouldn't hesitate. This round is a tough call, but given Jason's relentless nature and proven durability, I'd say he has the edge in a straightforward brawl. Round 3, the esoteric battle. This is where things get interesting for Pennywise. If physical forms and psychological tricks fail, it has one last ace up its sleeve: its true form, the Deadlights. The Deadlights are the true essence of Pennywise, an indescribable, writhing mass of orange light that exists in the macroverse. Looking at the Deadlights drives a person insane, their mind shattered and their soul untethered from their body, leaving them a catatonic husk. This is its ultimate weapon. So, what would happen if Jason Voorhees stared into the Deadlights? This is the million-dollar question. Jason's mind is, well, it's not exactly normal. He's arguably already broken, driven by a supernatural rage. Is there a soul there in the traditional sense for the Deadlights to consume? Or is he just an empty vessel animated by vengeance? It's possible that Jason's simple, one-track mind would be completely immune to the mind-shattering horror of the Deadlights. He might just see a weird, bright light and try to hit it with his machete. On the other hand, if the Deadlights are a true cosmic-level power that destroys any consciousness it touches, then even Jason's rudimentary mind could be obliterated. This is where the nature of Jason's immortality comes into question. Is it a curse? Is he a revenant? A deadite? Depending on which movie's lore you follow, the answer changes. If his undeath is purely physical, the Deadlights might just work. So, who is the final winner? It's incredibly close, and it all comes down to that final esoteric confrontation. Let's weigh the arguments. Jason is virtually immune to Pennywise's primary weapon, fear. He also has a significant advantage in a direct physical fight due to his immense strength, durability, and single-minded aggression. He wouldn't play Pennywise's games, he'd just attack. Pennywise's only guaranteed win condition is the Deadlights. However, the success of the Deadlights depends entirely on Jason having a mind or soul that can be broken in the conventional sense. Given his unique state of being a reanimated corpse fueled by pure rage, I'm going to make a controversial call. I believe Jason Voorhees would win. My reasoning is this: Pennywise's entire arsenal is designed to defeat mortals, preying on their emotions and sanity. Jason is arguably post-mortal. He is a force of nature, much like a hurricane or an earthquake. You can't scare a hurricane. You can't reason with it. You can only be destroyed by it. Pennywise would try its tricks. They would fail. and it would be forced into a physical confrontation, it would likely lose. Even if it revealed the deadlights, there's a strong chance Jason would be unaffected, simply perceiving it as another obstacle to destroy. The battle would be long, brutal, and destructive. But in the end, the unstoppable force would likely triumph over the object of fear. Jason would just keep coming, until there was nothing left of the clown to come back. What do you think? Am I underestimating the cosmic power of Pennywise? Or is Jason's brute force simply too much for the creature from the Macroverse? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Who do you think would win this ultimate horror showdown? Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the breakdown and subscribe for more battles from the world of horror. Thanks for watching, and try not to have nightmares. Let's start at the beginning. We have to, because with Jason Voorhees, the beginning matters more than it does with almost any other monster in horror. Most horror villains are defined by what they became. Michael Myers is the shape, the boogeyman. Freddy Krueger is the dream demon. Jason is defined, first and completely, by what was done to him. Camp Crystal Lake, 1957. Picture it, a classic summer camp in the woods of New Jersey. It's the kind of place that lives in that old American mythology of childhood summer's canoes on the water, campfires at night, swimming tests, and ghost stories told in the dark. A place that's supposed to be supervised, supposed to be safe. It's designed to give kids that feeling of summer freedom, but within the protective bubble of adult responsibility. Jason Voorhees was a child at that camp in 1957, and he was different. The films are a bit vague about the specifics. This was an era that didn't have the right words for neurodivergence, but the picture is clear enough. He was a kid who needed extra care, extra attention, extra supervision. He needed the one thing the adults responsible for him weren't providing, because the adults weren't watching. The counselors' teenagers themselves really were distracted. They were doing what teenagers do when left alone in the summer dark. And Jason, unsupervised, went to the lake, and he drowned. This is the wound. This is the core of everything that follows. It's not some traumatic, theatrical villain origin story. It's a mundane wound, a wound of negligence, of adults failing their duty of care to a child who depended on them. It's about the permanent, generational damage that kind of failure creates. What came out of that lake, and something did come out, wasn't a ghost in the traditional sense. It wasn't a spirit looking for peace. It was a wrong that refused to stop being wrong. It was a consequence that would not stay buried in the past where it was convenient to leave it. Jason Voorhees is what negligence looks like when it gets back up and keeps coming. His physical presence, as we see him across the Friday the 13th franchise, is just staggering. He is enormous, well over 6 feet tall, built on a scale that feels beyond normal biology. He has the mass and presence of something the cold depths of that lake changed on a fundamental level. He moves with the patient, unstoppable momentum of a natural disaster. He never runs. He never hurries. Why would he need to? No matter what you do, no matter how fast you run, Jason arrives. This has been established over 12 films as an almost supernatural fact. He doesn't teleport, exactly, but he's always there when he needs to be. He emerges from the one angle you forgot to check, appearing in the exact space you thought was safe. And he does not speak. He hasn't spoken a word since the earliest films. And that silence isn't just a detail, it defines him. Jason's silence is the silence of something that has moved completely beyond communication, beyond negotiation, beyond the social contract of language we humans use to manage each other. He has nothing to say to you. He has nothing to negotiate. He has a machete, a direction of travel, and a momentum that does not stop. By the later films, his durability is basically supernatural. He has been drowned, burned, frozen, electrocuted, blown up, shot, stabbed, chopped up. He's been subjected to a truly remarkable variety of creative destruction across his filmography. And the consistent result of all of it is this: he stops temporarily, then he gets back up. The mechanics of his resilience are never explained, because any explanation would just make it smaller. The films establish it not as a specific power, but as a general, overwhelming, almost theological fact. Jason does not end. Let's talk about the hockey mask. He picks it up in the third film, and it has since become one of the most iconic images in all of horror. It's more than just a costume choice. The mask is practical armor, sure, but it's also a statement. It says, the face beneath this is not for you to see. The humanity that was once here is not available for your inspection or for your sympathy. What stands before you is not a person in any sense that gives you leverage over it. It is a function, an ongoing consequence, something that has simplified itself entirely into the act of what it does. In his own environment, in the woods around Crystal Lake in the water, in the darkness of a camp that's been closed for decades, a refuses to stay closed Jason is as close to unstoppable as anything the genre has ever produced. He is the apex predator of his territory in the most complete sense of the word. Every other living thing in that territory exists, functionally, at his sufferance. So the question tonight isn't whether Jason can be stopped in his own territory. We know the answer to that. The question is what happens when his territory is invaded by something that doesn't play by the rules his territory runs on. What happens when a force of nature meets something that breaks all the laws of nature? Pennywise the Dancing Clown is, in one sense, the most successful costume in horror history. The clown, the white face and the red hair, and the enormous shoes and the balloons is the interface, the user-facing layer, the thing it deploys when it wants to walk among humans in a form they will recognize, approach, engage with before the recognition of danger arrives. It is important to understand this from the beginning. Pennywise the clown is not the monster. Pennywise is the mask the monster wears. What lives beneath the clown, what the clown is the face of, is something so much older and so much larger and so much more difficult to comprehend that even the mythology created to contain it strains under the weight. It is called it, capital I, no further designation required, because what it is resists the kind of categorization that produces names. It is an entity that arrived in what would become Derry, Maine, at a time so distant from recorded human history that the town itself does not yet exist, that the continent itself is barely recognizable. It came from somewhere outside the universe, from what the mythology calls the macroverse or the deadlights, the space beyond the physical reality that human consciousness inhabits. A space where the rules that organize our experience of existence simply do not apply. It hibernates. This is one of its defining characteristics, and it is crucial to the mythology. It sleeps for approximately 27 years at a time, deep beneath Derry in the tunnels and sewers that run under the town. And then it wakes, and when it wakes, it feeds. It feeds on fear, specifically, on the fear response of living creatures, with a particular preference for children, not because of any specific malice toward children as such, but because children fear more completely than adults do, because the fear of a child is pure and total in a way that adult fear, managed and filtered through experience and rationalization, simply is not. It has discovered, over millennia of feeding, that children are the finest source of what it needs. The fear sweetens the meat in its own internal vocabulary. Terror is seasoning. The Pennywise form, the clown, is chosen for this reason. It draws children in. It presents as something that should be safe and slightly exciting. The clown at the edge of the storm drain, the balloon in the wrong place, the invitation to come closer that reads as innocent until it absolutely does not. By the time the child understands that the clown is wrong, that the teeth are too many and too long, that the eyes are not the eyes of anything that has ever been human, that the smell coming from the drain is not the smell of water. It is, in most cases, too late. Pennywise reads fear. This is its fundamental ability and the foundation of everything else it does. It does not simply see your face or hear your heartbeat. It reaches into the specific architecture of your deepest, most personal terror and finds the exact shape that fear takes in you. Not a generic monster, not a general darkness, but the specific thing that you personally cannot face. The thing you see at the edge of sleep. The thing you cannot name, but have always known is there. Pennywise finds that thing and becomes it. This is not illusion in a simple sense. The manifestations it creates have physical reality. They can touch, they can harm, they can kill. The degree to which they are real is proportional to how real the victim believes them to be, which is why the counter to Pennywise is never physical and always psychological. If you can reduce your fear, you reduce its power. If you can stand before the thing it has become and refuse, truly refuse, at the level of conviction rather than performance, to be afraid of it, the manifestation weakens. This makes Pennywise perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated predator in horror. It is not just hunting bodies. It is hunting minds. It is studying you, learning you, finding the keyhole in your psychology, and fitting itself to it so precisely that your own terror becomes the mechanism of your destruction. In Derry, it is essentially omnipotent. The town itself functions as an extension of its influence. People in Derry are, on some level, always under its sway, their violence amplified, their willingness to ignore and normalize horror elevated, the protective instincts that would normally move adults to shield children, somehow blunted and redirected. Derry is its feeding ground and its fortress simultaneously, and within it, only the very specific combination of childhood courage and the power of belief held collectively has ever pushed it back. And even then, even in those moments of apparent defeat, it retreats. It does not die. It waits. And 27 years later, it comes back. It has been doing this for longer than human civilization has existed. It is very patient. The encounter happens at the edge, literally. The boundary where the territory of one bleeds into the territory of the other. In the geography of horror mythology, Crystal Lake and Derry are not so far apart as their fictional addresses might suggest. They occupy the same moral landscape. Rural America, the parts of the country that exist between the places people look. The woods that surround Crystal Lake and the tunnels that run beneath Derry share a quality of darkness that is more than the absence of light. It is the darkness of places where things have been happening for a very long time without anyone paying sufficient attention. The encounter is not planned. Neither of these entities plans in the conventional sense. Jason operates on compulsion and territory. Pennywise operates on hunger and opportunity. What brings them together is the same thing that brings most disasters together, the convergence of two systems that were not designed to interact, suddenly occupying the same space. A group of teenagers. It is always a group of teenagers in these woods, because the genre has its grammar, and we should not pretend otherwise. A group of teenagers who made a wrong turn, or chose the wrong campsite, or followed a trail that appeared on no map, and led them somewhere that neither of them should have been. Teenagers who are now, through their presence, providing the scent trail that draws both hunters to the same location. Jason arrives first, as he always does in his own territory. He emerges from the tree line the way he always emerges, without announcement, without the dramatic build-up that the films sometimes provide with a music sting, just the sudden, terrifying fact of him, present in the space where he was not, and now simply is. The teenagers scatter. This is the correct response. It does not help, but it is correct. And then, from the direction of a culvert, a drainage pipe that runs beneath the old camp road, the kind of infrastructure that has been rusting in place since the 1970s, and that no one has thought to maintain or remove. A red balloon drifts up into the evening air. Jason stops. This is notable. Jason does not typically stop. Jason moves through space with the relentless consistency of weather. He doesn't pause for terrain or obstacle or the particular nature of what he is encountering. But the balloon stops him for a moment, and in that moment something happens that the Friday the 13th films have never quite shown us. Jason assesses. Not with the cold analytical processing of a machine, not with the strategic intelligence of a trained combatant. With something older and more animal, the predator's recognition that something else is here, something that is also a predator. The woods, which are Jason's, feel different. The air, which he owns by long precedent of violence, carries a note that does not belong to him. From the drainage pipe, laughter. The specific musical, deeply wrong laughter of Pennywise the dancing clown, echoing up through the metal and out into the October evening, like something being broadcast from a frequency that shouldn't exist. And then the white painted face appears at the edge of the pipe. The yellow eyes. The teeth. Pennywise looks at Jason Voorhees and does the thing it always does. It looks for the fear. It reaches the psychic extension of its feeding sense, the part of it that reads terror, the way a hand reads heat, and it finds nothing. Or not quite nothing, but nothing it can use. This is the first and most important thing to understand about this confrontation. Pennywise's primary weapon, its ability to find the specific terror at the center of a living creature and weaponize it, does not work on Jason Voorhees in the way it works on anyone else. Because Jason's psychology, to the extent that it still functions as psychology, does not contain accessible fear in the way human psychology does. What Pennywise finds when it reaches into Jason is not the rich, complex, navigable landscape of human terror that it has been feeding on for millennia. It finds the lake, the cold and the dark, and the drowning and the mother's voice calling from above the surface as the water closes over. It finds the wound that Jason is built around, but the wound has been so thoroughly calcified, so completely absorbed into the structure of what Jason is, that it is not a wound anymore in any sense that Pennywise can leverage. It is more like the foundation of a building than an injury. You cannot hurt a building by threatening its foundation. The foundation is why the building stands. Pennywise pauses. For an entity that has been successfully frightening and devouring creatures for longer than recorded history, this pause is extraordinary. It has encountered resistance before. The Losers Club, in both iterations of the story, found ways to push back against it, to weaken it through the specific mechanism of collective belief and courage. But this is different. This is not courage. Jason is not refusing to be afraid in the way the Losers Club refused. He is simply not available for fear in the first place. The clown tilts its head. The yellow eyes narrow. It tries again, searching deeper, looking for some accessible layer of the psychology it is reading. Because everything that has ever been alive has something it can find, some terror at some depth. It has never failed to find one. What it finds, at the deepest accessible layer of Jason Voorhees, is not fear of anything external. It is purpose, compulsion, the single-minded, world-excluding drive to protect the territory and punish the intrusion, repeated and repeated and repeated until it has become the entire content of what this thing is. This is not something Pennywise can become. It cannot transform into Jason's purpose. It cannot personify compulsion. It can become anything that frightens you, and Jason is not frightened by compulsion because Jason is compulsion. The clown smiles anyway, because Pennywise smiles at everything. The smile is a default state rather than a response, and steps out of the drainage pipe to its full height. And Jason, who has been standing in the tree line, processing the information his body is giving him about the wrongness of the thing in front of him, starts walking forward. The first exchange is, from Pennywise's perspective, exploratory. It does not yet fully understand what it is dealing with, and it is old enough and experienced enough to gather information before committing to a strategy. It shifts form, partially, experimentally, becoming something large and many-limbed and fundamentally wrong, the kind of body that it deploys when size and shock are the tools required. The thing it becomes towers over Jason, multi-jointed limbs extending, the clown face stretched across something that no longer has a face in any anatomical sense. Jason does not slow down. This is what hits Pennywise, immediately and with an impact it is not prepared for, in the first moments of the engagement. The shock and awe that it deploys so effectively against human targets produces no behavioral change in Jason Voorhees whatsoever. The machete keeps rising. The forward momentum does not alter. The transformation, which should produce at minimum a flinch, a hesitation, the half-second of recalibration that Pennywise uses to close the distance, produces nothing. The machete connects. Pennywise can be physically harmed. This is established in its own mythology. Silver, belief, the physical bravery of children striking it, and Jason's machete, swung with the force that Jason generates, produces damage. Not fatal damage. Pennywise regenerates. It is not a creature that can be killed by physical trauma alone, but damage registers damage. It has to redirect resources to repair damage that communicates something it has not been communicated to in a very long time. This is going to be different. It retaliates with the tools that have always worked. It generates fear light, a psychic broadcast of terror that it can direct at targets to amplify and overwhelm their existing fear response. Against a human being, this is debilitating. It is essentially forcing someone's own nightmare directly into their conscious experience at maximum volume. Against Jason it is, not nothing, but structurally ineffective. Jason's nervous system, whatever it has become after decades of death and resurrection, and the particular alchemy of Crystal Lake's influence, does not process the signal the way a human nervous system does. The terror broadcast finds no amplifiable fear to work with and dissipates. They engage in the physicality of it, and here is where the battle becomes genuinely interesting as a tactical problem. Pennywise is not accustomed to physical engagement as its primary mode. It is a psychological predator that has physical capability as a backup. It can be corporeal, it can generate mass and strength. But these are secondary tools, the options it reaches for, and the psychological approach has already done most of the work. Against Jason, the psychological approach has done nothing, which means it is fighting entirely in its secondary mode against an opponent for whom the physical is the only mode. Jason, conversely, has never been a tactical fighter. He does not adapt strategies, does not read opponents for weakness, does not circle and probe and adjust the way a trained combatant does. He moves forward. He applies force. He keeps coming. In every previous engagement across his entire mythology, these qualities have been sufficient because every previous opponent eventually reaches a breaking point. They tire, they despair, they run out of places to go, and Jason catches them. Against Pennywise, the breaking point is not available in the usual place. Pennywise does not tire in any meaningful biological sense. It does not despair. It does not lose hope or the will to continue the way human prey eventually does. What it loses, what it is losing, across the duration of this engagement, with an unfamiliarity that is itself a kind of crisis, is certainty. The absolute, millennia-long certainty that it knows how any encounter ends. Pennywise tries everything in sequence. It becomes massive, the spider form that represents one of its most physically powerful physical expressions. Jason is knocked back by limbs the size of structural beams, but does not fall and does not stop. It generates illusions, not fear illusions, since those have proven useless, but physical-seeming environmental illusions. The ground becomes water. The trees become figures. Jason walks through the water and through the figures without alteration, in pace or direction, because Jason does not process the environment as information to be evaluated. He processes it as terrain to be crossed. It calls on Derry. Even at this distance from its home ground, it has influence, threads of psychic connection running through the area, the ambient fear field it has cultivated over centuries. It draws on this amplifying whatever ambient darkness exists in the Crystal Lake area, trying to build an advantage from the metaphysical environment. Jason, who is himself part of the Crystal Lake environment, part of its metaphysical furniture, is not amplified or disrupted by this. If anything, the attempt to darken his environment activates something in him, a territorial response, a drawing down of this specific awful authority he has in these woods. The trees, the lake, the dark, these are Jason's. They have been Jason's for longer than Pennywise has been feeding in this region. And they respond, in whatever way such things respond, to the presence of the thing they belong to. It is Pennywise, for the first time in this encounter, that pauses, that recalibrates. That does something Jason is congenitally incapable of doing. It thinks. Have you ever wondered what Pennywise, the terrifying clown from Stephen King's It, truly is? Forget the spider form you see at the end of the movie. That's just a physical manifestation our minds can barely comprehend. The real horror lies in something far more ancient and cosmic, the deadlights. So, what are the deadlights? Imagine a form of energy from a dimension beyond our own, a place called the Macroverse. This isn't just bright light. It's a living, chaotic, and utterly malevolent force. The deadlights are Pennywise's true form, an eldritch being of pure, destructive energy. It's often described as a writhing, orange-glowing void that drives anyone who looks directly into it insane. It's the raw essence of consumption and fear. Why does it take the form of a clown, or a leper, or your deepest, darkest fear? Because its true form is incomprehensible to the human mind. To interact with us, to feed on us, it has to project itself into our reality. It chooses forms that will generate the most potent emotion it craves: fear. Fear, for Pennywise, is like salt on a meal. It makes its victims taste so much better. The clown is just a mask, a tool to terrorize the children of Derry before it consumes their life force. The Losers Club didn't just fight a monster. They faced a cosmic entity. Their secret weapon wasn't physical strength, but the power of belief, friendship, and courage. By confronting their fears and uniting, they were able to perform the ritual of Chub, a psychic battle of wills against this interdimensional horror. They didn't just defeat the clown. They stared into the heart of the deadlights, and against all odds, they won. So the next time you see a red balloon, remember it's not just a clown you should be afraid of. It's the ancient, hungry void from beyond the stars that's wearing the clown suit. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Let's take a step back from the blood and chaos of the fight itself. Let's ask what this epic clash between Jason Voorhees and Pennywise really means. What does it tell us about them as monsters, and about the very nature of horror? Jason Voorhees is a creature of the physical world. His horror is tangible, material. It's rooted in the specific failure of a specific place. He's what happens when the systems meant to protect us fail, when a child slips through the cracks, and the consequences of that failure refuse to stay buried. He's unkillable because the wrong that created him can never be righted. The people responsible are long gone, and the child they failed has become something beyond resolution. Pennywise, on the other hand, is a monster of the mind. Its horror is internal, personal, perfectly customized to the fear map of every person it meets. It's what happens when the darkness inside us is given a face, an appetite. It's survived for eons because fear is an infinite resource. As long as there are living things, there will be fear, and as long as there's fear, it can feed. So, what does their battle reveal? It reveals the limits of each monster's power. Pennywise's limit is that it needs a psyche to manipulate. It's a sophisticated predator, but that sophistication needs complexity in its prey. Against Jason's brutal, single-minded simplicity, there's nothing for Pennywise to latch on to. You can't pick a lock on a door that has no lock. A master of psychological warfare is useless against an enemy with no psychology to attack. Jason's limit is that he's bound to the physical universe. He's a powerhouse within our reality, but he has no weapons for what lies beyond it. Pennywise, at its core, is an extra-dimensional being just visiting our world. You can permanently defeat something with a machete, and that's something SNT truly physical to begin with. This fight can't have a clean winner. The battle doesn't end with a knockout. It ends with an interruption. The terrified humans who started all this, who drew both monsters here, are watching from the shadows. And in their terror, they have a moment of pure clarity. They realize these two titans aren't fighting over them. They're fighting over something much older. Territory, dominance, the eternal question of which darkness gets to own this corner of the world. And in that ancient, unresolvable fight between the darkness of trauma and the darkness of fear, the humans just slip away into the night, which is what we've always done. And both monsters let them go, because they were never the point. So what do we get when you put these two icons together? You get the full picture of what horror has always been trying to show us. The external darkness, the thing that comes from the lake, from a world that failed to protect its children. And the internal darkness, the thing that comes from inside us, from the fears we carry every single day. Neither darkness wins tonight. Neither ever truly wins. They are too old, too matched, too fundamental to be defeated. They will both be here when you turn off the lights. They were here long before lights were even invented. Jason is in the water. Pennywise is in the drain. And somewhere between them, in the dark that belongs to both and neither, a single red balloon drifts up toward a surface it can never reach. And something that used to be a boy watches it rise. And for tonight, he does not follow. Thank you for watching.